Hey everyone, Hallie here. Today I wanted to make a character guide on Groot in Marvel Rivals. In today's video, I'm going to be going over how you should be playing Groot in Marvel Rivals, your role on a team, and some general tips and tricks and just playstyle information that will make you a better Groot player overall. If this video does help you at all, it would mean a lot to me if you left a like, and without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So I'm going to start this off by giving a basic overview of Groot's kit. Groot's primary attack is a punch ability that is incredibly far ranged that you can use to poke enemies. Groot's secondary attack ability is to throw a grenade, a spore grenade that explodes and does quite a significant amount of damage. Groot then has two different utility abilities, one where he can make a large single wall, a root wall that you can use to not only gain some elevation but also block off enemies. And then he also has two smaller walls that he is able to summon to do the exact same thing. That you can use these walls as a platform or to, again, just block off enemies. And Groot's ultimate ability is to throw down a black hole that sucks in all the nearby enemies and allows them to just sit there for about 5 seconds and your team can just unload damage on them. So that's an overview of Groot's kit. So let's get into how you should be playing Groot in your role as a Groot player. As a Groot player, your primary role within the team is going to be soaking up damage and focusing on crowd control and really separating up the enemy team. A lot of the way you are going to be soaking up this damage and blocking off the enemy team is going to be through your wall ability. And it's also important to note that Groot he's very much a poker as a attack. His primary attack is very much good at long range poking, and his secondary ability is great if enemies get a little bit too up close. So we went over Groot's kit and what he does on the team. So let's talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses of Groot. Groot's strong points is being able to soak up a ton of damage. Through his walls and his very high health, Groot is able to just survive a lot of bullets. Although he isn't able to heal himself, if you are able to get a strategist on your team to pocket heal you, it is very easy to survive as Groot. Groot is also up there with, I would say, Penny Parker as far as map control and being able to hold down sections of the map. His walls can be used to just completely block off the enemy's push to an objective, which can be incredibly powerful, and it can also be used to separate a tank from their team, or you just single out a single player, making a 6v6 into a 5v6, which is just really strong, and Groot is fantastic for facilitating those types of situations. And the last significant strength I have for Groot is that he is quite strong. He is able to do quite a lot of damage, and his damage is range, which is very useful. It makes his survivability a lot higher, and it just makes it a lot easier to, poke the enemy, throw your secondary attack ability, and just get some pretty easy damage off. So those are some main strengths for Groot. Some of the weaknesses that you should look out for when playing as Groot is his very limited mobility. He doesn't really have any type of mobility abilities. He is only able to really walk around and build walls. So you really got to be careful with your positioning as Groot. You don't want to get too ballsy and push deep into the enemy team, and then you get killed and then you have no mobility to get out of there. So just be very careful with your mobility as Groot. Groot can also be quite overwhelmed with multiple enemies if you don't get your walls down properly, as his attacks are mainly single target focused attacks. So it's just, play around your team, although you are a vanguard, so you should always be playing around your team. However, those are just some important things to note, is that Groot's mobility is very limited, and I would say that is the main weakness with Groot and the main thing that you need to look out for. So that's an overview of Groot's kit, some pros and cons. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the team synergies and how you should be teaming up and when you should be picking Groot. Because just like all characters in Marvel Rival, you shouldn't just be playing these characters every single game. Every game in Marvel Rivals is going to be different depending on what the enemy team picks and what your team picks. So let's go ahead and talk about when you should be picking Groot and when a team should have a Groot on their team. Groot is mainly focused on crowd control. He is not going to be a very heavy damage dealer. He is going to be focused on separating the enemy team. So if your team already has a lot of damage dealers, but is just getting overwhelmed with the amount of enemies, and you need to facilitate more situations where it is like a one-on-one or a 1v6 situation, Groot is fantastic. So if you don't have any crowd control or map control, Groot is a good choice. Groot pairs really well with other tanks. Like if you could get just one other Vanguard on your team with a Groot, it is very easy to take turns being the frontline anchor for the team and soaking up the damage while your strategists heal you. So I highly recommend Groot not being your only tank on the team, although it is certainly an option that you can do. But Groot is a fantastic tank if you pair him with a character like Hulk or Doctor Strange or Penny Parker especially, because then you have two characters that are very strong in map control. I also highly recommend playing Groot on modes where you have to sit on a certain specific area for a certain amount of time. Groot is great on payload maps as well. However, you do have to play him a little bit differently because his walls can be instantly destroyed whenever they make contact with the payload. So he is very powerful on maps where you are just sitting down and you're not really on the offensive, or you're just sitting in one location. So he's a fantastic defensive character. He can also definitely be used on offense. However, you just need to play him a little bit more intelligently. Another great time to pick Groot is when the enemy team has a bunch of melee characters. I have found that when the enemy team has a bunch of melee characters, I can pick Groot. And then whenever those melee characters pushes up and tries to attack my entire team, I can place down a wall, section them off, and then we have a 1v6 facilitated where my team can easily pick off this duelist, and we can do that with their other duelist. So he is a fantastic counter to melee characters in particular. However, he is also strong against ranged characters, as you can essentially just use your walls that you build as barricades to hide behind. So he is very strong. However, against melee characters in specific, he can facilitate situations where you can very easily get some kills. It's just really important to note that Groot really isn't a damage dealer. He is great at poking, and his ultimate can certainly group a bunch of enemies up, and you can use your secondary ability to get some damage off. However, he is not a tank that is going to be dealing a ton of damage. So just keep that in mind. Maybe if your team needs more damage and, less, if you need more damage, don't be picking Groot. That is my main tip. So yeah, that's when you should be picking Groot, is whenever you need some crowd control, whenever you need some map control, he is fantastic. Whenever you're going against a enemy team that has melee duelists, or like melee characters in general that are really messing up your team, you can use Groot to create walls and help facilitate 1v6s, which can just help you win the game and, make fighting a lot easier. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into some tips and tricks and how you should just be playing Groot overall. Groot should be played as a frontline character. You want to be up in the enemy's face, not too far in the enemy's face, but you want to be the front line for your team. You want to be building walls to provide your team cover, to annoy the enemy team, and to create space for your team to do things like capture objectives or kill a specific enemy and things like that. Groot is focused on zoning and creating map control. So use Groot not really just as a purely offensive character, but use him to facilitate and set up situations where your walls block off an enemy's escape route and your team can easily get a kill. Another thing you can do that will make you a better Groot player and just a better player in general is learning the maps, and specifically learning where the health kits are. Once you know the spawns for the health kits and the common positioning and routes that enemies will be taking when retreating from a fight, you can use Groot's walls and his abilities to prevent the enemy from healing and to make sure you can finish off an enemy properly. So I highly recommend learning the maps, and even if you can't learn the maps super well, take note of where health packs are and try to prevent the enemies from getting them. On that same note, do be mindful to not block off your team. Try to place your walls in front of the enemy team. Try to block off routes that the enemy will be going. don't block off routes that your team will be going. And the nice thing to note is that if you do accidentally block a route that your team will be using, or that you need to be going through with your wall, or if you just want your wall to go away, you can instantly reclaim your wall as Groot, which is super powerful. You can instantly demolish your wall whenever you want. So just keep that in mind. If you mess up a wall placement, it's not the end of the world. However, do try not to, as it does put it on cooldown. And on the topic of removing your walls, use that to your advantage. Try to remove your wall in times where your enemies aren't expecting it to get a jump on them. Maybe your team doesn't really need to block damage, and maybe you're ready to attack. You can remove your wall and just go attack the enemy. Groot is incredibly flexible with his walls, and that is just what makes him super powerful. So be sure to take advantage of that flexibility. So those are some general tips on how to play Groot and how to just use him effectively. So let's get into some just things to avoid. This goes with essentially every character in Marvel Rivals, but especially Groot. Don't overcommit with him. Don't try to get too greedy and get too many kills as Groot. You want to be playing with your team. You are an incredibly important character as a vanguard character, and especially as Groot, because you play a central role in map control and Groot zoning for your team. You make just playing the game a lot easier for your team when you are a good Groot player. So try not to die, try not to overcommit in battles, and be safe out there. You know what I mean? Play smart and don't overcommit. And another tip that I have, and quite a significant tip, is be mindful of your team's positioning. And this, again, goes with basically every character. But, you know, whenever you are on a objective and you look around you and you realize that your entire team is dead and there's no strategist character, maybe backing up is a good idea. Or maybe you see that your duelist is all the way in the front lines. Maybe it's a Spider-Man beating up the enemy team. And you think, oh, maybe I should go up there and help him. Don't do that. Just stick with your team, play the objective, don't overcommit, and just be a smart person, okay? Be aware of your team's positioning, be aware of the enemy's positioning, and just be smart. So with all of that out of the way, that is my overview for the Groot character within Marvel Rivals. I wanted to give you guys some tips and just a general overview of the character's kit, how you should be using him, and just how to use him effectively. If this video did help you guys, it would mean a lot to me if you left a like. And if you're looking for more general tips, I also made a video all about that, which will appear at the top right of your screen now. Anyways, thank you so much for watching to the very end. It really does mean the world, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.